Welcome to the Empowered Catholic Podcast with Karen and Curtis Herbert, where we combine the best of theology, science, and coaching to inspire your empowerment. It's our mission to help you release the inner obstacles that are holding you back from embracing true Christian freedom, so the power of the Holy Spirit can manifest in you. So if you believe that God has more for you, if you want to believe that God has more for you, listen on, my friend. Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Catholic Podcast. You are here with Karen and Curtis Herbert. That's us.
That's us, and Curtis, that's me, in case anybody was confused about that. And
you do have a very distinctive voice. I think people know who you are by now.
They know. I better be good, better behave myself. And speaking of behavior, there are about 33 saints to choose from on this day, Wednesday, July 9th.
Really?
Well, at least according to the particular Catholic website I pulled up. It's striking to think of all those saints, and there were martyrs in there as well. And it made me wonder what their connections might be in their lives to the topic we're picking up today.
Oh.
And the topic is justice. Really, it's the Beatitude about justice.
Happy are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Is that the one?
Yeah, for they shall be satisfied. And it's interesting, when I think of justice, my mind immediately goes to the courtroom.
Sure. That makes sense, given your past.
Yeah, good. We want justice. And there was this rap singer, Diddy, who was on trial, and the commentators were talking about justice and his sentence. We think about rights. That's a language of justice that's very modern, and the church uses that language in some places. The rights are simply what is owed to us. It's our moral claim on the means necessary to fulfill a duty. That's a right. So that's connected to our ideas of justice. What else do we think of when we hear the word justice, do you think?
Well, I kind of assume that there's been a wrong done, that some wrong has been committed that needs to be righted or put right or fixed. And there's that element. There's also the element of, retribution or punishment. Like the person who did the thing needs to be justly punished with the proper consequences for their action and not get away with it, as it were.
And as our longtime listeners know, we're getting ready to tell you to change how you think about whatever justice. It is we're talking about in case this justice. But we're still not done with modern ideas. I think we might talk about fighting for justice.
Right.
So you go to the protest, maybe throw a rock or something. I don't know. Are we allowed to do that?
Probably not.
Is it just? When is it just to throw a rock at a protest?
Right. So
what if I'm just throwing it at a tree?
Yeah. And so sometimes the just or unjustness is maybe not so much a person, but a situation or a pattern or something in a relationship, either not just between individuals, but groups of people. We definitely think that way currently about just and unjust situations and patterns.
Now compare that to some scriptural language. So here's just paraphrasing Psalm 96. Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad, let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. For the Lord comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his faithfulness. How about that?
That's pretty eye-opening. So here's the psalmist saying, it is a time for joy. Judgment is a time for joy and singing and being glad. And I don't think we normally think of that. We think of judgment and we think, oh no, what have I done? I'm in trouble. And we start to get nervous and think of, what we're going to be punished for.
Well, and in popular imagination, the Lord coming to judge the earth is terrifying.
Right.
And certainly it's preceded by truly terrifying events.
But here it is, let everything sing for joy, for the Lord is coming to judge the earth in righteousness and faithfulness.
And there's language all through Scripture like this that associates judgment with the joy of putting things in order, putting things the way God meant them to be. God's wonderful creation it's not groaning anymore because things have been arranged with wisdom and brilliance and beauty, because God has finally come to order things, to make things right.
I think we all doesn't take anything to look around and see that things are disordered currently. And I'm disordered. There's things I do and behaviors I have that are disordered. And here's this time we say as Christians, the final judgment when God will come and put it all right, make it all the way he intended it to be.
And here's a question. What is the point of justice? What is the point? What is it we're trying to get to? What are we trying to arrive at? And we've talked about a bunch of the answers that the modern world might give, yet what would you suggest, Karen?
So you're asking, well, what's the point of putting things in order? Or
no, it's like, what are we trying to get to? Once we've put things in order, what's the end game here?
Well, I think it's what we talked about and touched on last week, which is this idea that God comes to create a beautiful creation filled with shalom, that word peace, and the lion lying down with the lamb, and all of creation singing to the Lord, and Christ reigning over all in truth and goodness and mercy. That's what I think.
Shalom is the idea of satisfaction and fulfillment in all areas of life, in the human and what we might call the supernatural, the spiritual, the mental, the emotion. It's a very broad and deep idea of things being well. So the point of justice as shalom. Now that's a new thought.
Right. I think it is.
It's a new perspective, and it's hard to create new habits of thought around this. Now, can I just talk about the word justice a little bit?
Please.
Justice, in the modern sense, like we said, the courtroom, it's kind of a very narrow idea. Yet in the world, and historically, justice, say the ancient world, was a much broader concept. So I'll tell you a story about justice.
Okay.
When we were first married, I needed to go get a couch, and I had to drive maybe 150 miles and back to go get it on short notice. And I really needed a full-size van. Yet it was a lot of money to rent a van, and it wasn't convenient for me to go there and park my car and get the thing and drop the couch. It wasn't really working for me. So I finally asked my friend Jean, whose name has not been changed because there's no innocent people to protect here.
Tell him you said that.
Yeah, you tell him. And so I borrowed his van, and he found out I was getting a couch, and he said, "Oh, well, I'll take out the back seat for you," which is a pain in the neck. And, "Oh, well, I'll clean up the walls in there, make sure it's all clean. You won't get your nice new couch all dirty. And the van will be ready for you when you pick it up. You just park your car right there on the street. You bring it back whenever you're ready." He was super generous. And when I was done with all that, returning the van, we had this big, long conversation. And I was telling Jean, you've got to take some money or something for this, because you have no idea how much money and time and trouble. And I put, 300 miles on that van. But he kept saying, no, we're in prayer group together. I'm not going to take anything. This is just me doing what I do for people in that kind of relationship. And we went back and forth. And this is like the ancient idea of justice. He had this idea of who I was and how he should treat me. And he was determined to treat me that way. And for my part, I appreciated and understood all the things that using that van on short notice meant to me. And I was determined to do something for him. And this idea of justice it's got an element of generosity, giving people what they're due, considering their dignity and who they are and their worthiness. This is the more ancient idea of justice.
That is such an interesting example, Curtis, because here you are, and each of you has your own idea of what justice means in that situation. And I am struck by your description of this person for whom really the generosity in his mind was just. That was justice to him. And I think you're right, because when you read the Old Testament, for example, I'm thinking of this one passage in Ezekiel where he's talking about the just person and all these things about what it means to be just. And it's things like giving food to the hungry and clothing the naked. Those are things you do if you're just and you're reflecting God's justice. And I'm thinking of the things that their culture was defined by, like that one law where if you had a farm or a field, you would leave part of the crop at the edges and you wouldn't harvest it. You'd leave it for people who needed the food to come and do some work to harvest for their own. And that was not, out of the ordinary. That was what you did to be just. And really, it's like that idea of justice has a lot of mercy in it.
That's right. And just like the generosity of the man that loaned me the van, that was integral to his, and is integral to his identity and who he is. And he's simply a just man in the best sense of that word. And if we're in relationship with God, then we hunger and thirst for justice. It is part of what we do. It's how we operate. And I think you pointed to Ezekiel, the book in particular, lists a bunch of works of mercy and things that we do, yet to call them mercy, I mean, it's kind of an artificial divide to distinguish those acts from justice. Really, it's all part of the same package. This is who we are. This is how we live in the kingdom. This is who we are with God. We're a just person in relationship with him. And of course, we're in relationship with all his other children and all of his creation. This is merely how we do things. It is just as God is indivisible and the human person is, I was going to say indivisible, but yet we're always striving for this integrity, and how we treat other people is how we're going to ultimately treat God and treat ourselves.
Curtis, I'm thinking about these themes that have come up for us today, like having the joy around the judgment and
I forgot that part.
Seeing the generosity.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this. Okay.
Well, the way that we're describing justice, it is something to look forward to, because it's God's justice and not my meager, narrow concept of people getting their due and having retribution.
That's
and
right.
Me being punished for this thing I did. It's God's encompassing glory and mercy filling all of the earth and putting it all back in order. And this idea now that's coming to me about hungering and thirsting for justice, I'm thinking, wow, do I really hunger and thirst for justice, because frankly, there's some things that are disordered that I've kind of just made my peace with. It's fighting for the reordering of the disordered. I don't always do it. I can become attached to my little disordered patterns, and I can say, well, this is good enough. I'm not going to fight for this particular situation or this reality to be ordered. And maybe God's not asking me to. However, I'm questioning how deeply is my thirst for everything to be put right and for God's order to be realized.
Karen, as you know, Jacques Philippe has a book on the Beatitudes. It's called
Yes.
The 8 Doors of the Kingdom.
Yes, I've been wanting to reread that.
Yeah, so we want to check in with Jacques.
Great.
And he says a few things. Hunger and thirst for justice, desire for the kingdom, far from being passive waiting, are actively expressed in announcing the good news of the gospel and the work of transforming society to which each of us is called. So, Jacques, as we recognize what justice perhaps means, and as we desire it, this is really a desire for God's kingdom to come more fully into the world. God's kingdom is certainly just, and as we act out who we are as citizens of heaven here on earth, acting in the kingdom, of course, we have a desire and interest for justice, and it does call us on to reach outside of ourselves and to seek for society, for creation to be ordered.
So it's not just hunger and thirst and cry out, although crying out is an action, and wait. It's also, how do I work for justice now? How do I bring this part of the kingdom more into my life now and the lives of those around me?
That's right. And as I was reading Jacques, I noticed he's pretty careful not to tell us what to do exactly. This kind of action that the Spirit may be prompting us to, it's going to look different for a lot of people. And we're not in a position to discern for you, well, really, you should be doing this, or, you should be supporting that political cause, or you should, whatever it is.
So there actually takes, what I'm hearing you say is a very personal reflection on how this justice is brought forth for me, and how God's working that out through me. Because as we know, part of the Beatitudes is Jesus saying, okay, here's how God is working out his kingdom. He's working it out in those of you who mourn, and those of you who suffer, and those of you who hunger and thirst for justice.
That's right. We're on the team, and how do people on the team act?
Right.
And in our individual lives, circumstances vary greatly, and it's not for anybody to judge if you are actually hungry and thirsting for justice. Well, you're not thirsty enough for justice. God doesn't operate like that.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't do, as you were telling me earlier, kind of this quid pro quo. Well, here's these people, they're poor, and therefore they need to get X, Y, Z, because that's justice. That's how justice works.
Yeah, this is taken, therefore this is given. It's more of a gentle poke on our heart and on our conscience, I think, to have more awareness of seeking justice in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And results may vary. There may be people for whom certain kinds of acting outside of themselves really are their mission. That's what they're called on to do, and they can be a great inspiration for all of us.
Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Kurs. I'm thinking differently myself about this particular beatitude and what it means to put our heart into justice. I think it's going to be a meditation for me for a while.
Bringing things into shalom. I think that I'm going to kind of roll with that for a while.
And I'll remind our listeners, as Curtis has mentioned recently, if you have a thing that's on your heart and on your mind that you would like some help and some support in sorting through, in addressing in your life, please reach out to us. You can find us at empoweredcatholics.com. We'd love to have a little chat with you about your thing.
Thank you for being here with us this week. Visit our website at empoweredcatholics.com to learn more about us. And remember, as Pope Francis says, God comes to break open everything that keeps you closed in.